Do you remember a little game called Saints Row 2022? If you're like me, you've spent the last 4 years trying to forget it. This game was a train wreck from start to finish, but I want to take a look back at this notorious Saints Row reboot and share my trauma about how I watched this game burn my favourite IP to the ground. For me, this story started way back in the year 2021, when I sounded just a little more like this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. So today we're going to be discussing
So I had at the time been aware of a game known as Saints Row 5 in the community, and it was in development. Volition had said in a livestream that the next game would be a Saints Row game, and this got me very excited. Tweets were very quiet, not alluding to too much in terms of details, but the only thing anyone really cared about is the fact that Saints Row is coming back. All was quiet, but speculation was high. Would it be a sequel, a reboot, a prequel, an actual good game? And most importantly, is Saints Row going back to its gang roots? There was a real sense of tension in the air at this time in the community, but finally, after much anticipation, they made us stare at a wall. Marketing, baby. This wall, still to this day, is the biggest cock tease I've ever experienced in my life, and I do not say that lightly. The wall started out pretty bland, but over time they started tagging it up, and everyone had the exact same idea. Tagging. They're tagging the wall. It's gonna be gangster again. This stupid wall was enough for everyone to be sure that the next game was gonna be gangster. Volition are finally listening. Then finally, the wall told us a date with Jeff Keighley. This respectively should have been the first red flag. Sorry, Jeff. And then Doomsday came, introducing the Saints Row CGI trailer, baby. This trailer right here genuinely has to be the most hated gaming piece of media I have ever seen in my life. I have yet to encounter such universal disgust from a community at a trailer. I know personally, for a brief moment, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Eventually I managed to gaslight myself into the belief that this is just a CGI trailer and that at the end of the day, it's not going to be representative of the game. We just have to keep watching and keep trying to get into it, and maybe this will simply be a marketing hiccup in what will eventually be a decent game. This is where I believe my descent into madness began, by the way. We got some gameplay trailers, but they didn't really show much of anything, but they were enough to get me slightly back on board. The map looked great, the lighting was really cool, and you couldn't see the janky-ass combat system yet, so I was finally starting to see a little bit of a vision. It also helped that some of the details were starting to release, and they sounded pretty good. Take to the streets and skies, blast through urban deserts and environments in any one of the cars, bikes, planes, helicopters, VTOLs, and hover bikes. Wait, you see that right. Planes. Planes?! Are you joking? There are no planes in the damn game. They actually did this a lot. I don't know if they cut planes after this post was made, or if marketing literally has no clue what the hell was in the game, but this was just a blatant lie to the player. As I say, this was done a lot. It was one of the reasons I backed the game so heavy back in the day. I was told so many fantastic things that never came to fruition. Still waiting on multiplayer, by the way. Volition. Aside from that weird thing, the details that started to roll out sounded fantastic, and they were just about enough to get a few players back on board and a little excited. Not enough to wipe the taste of disgust from that CGI out of our mouths, but it began to not sound quite as awful. It was at this point I did a genius clever plot into pretending that I liked the game and convincing everyone that I'm actually a fan of this game. Oh, what a creative genius I am. And I fooled you all. Marketing slowed and we got some very nothingness trailers, and as time went on, I think people started to feel really indifferent about the game. Some had no hope and others didn't really care. And a few people thought, hey, it sounds okay. But overall, most of the hype for Saints Row was dead. And then the second tower got hit. They delayed the game for another 6 months. This is pitiful. How could they do this to us? The red flags were everywhere and hype was dead. It was gone. No one gave a fuck about Saints Row at this point. The community was immediately split up by the rocky marketing we got up until this point. But we did finally get a glimmer of hope with the customization showcase. They spoke about the customization in this game as if it's by far the greatest in the series, and were planning to make a whole event surrounding it. And I'll be the first, and perhaps the only one to say this customization showcase was pretty fucking awesome. They showed off just how extensive the customization was, and it was one of the few features they could actually back up their talk with, as it was pretty good. And they also released alongside the boss factory. Rest in peace, by the way. And this was a pretty huge deal for the community, by the way. I remember back in the day, I actually hosted a competition where we all submitted bosses and I ranked them out of 10. And everyone complained about how I ranked them, but it's okay because we had a good time doing it. Shout out to you though, if you remember that. Jesus, it's been 4 years. But this for me though, being honest and admittedly naive, sold the game for me. It was the part where I finally had my hope restored. I thought, hey, maybe the marketing just sucks, but if every feature is just as fleshed out as customization, Saints Row is back. That was the mindset I had, and it was unfortunately very incorrect. But with the things I was told to decide, and the things they were starting to show off in the trailers, I was kind of back on board. Between this, we got a bit of marketing fluff, but mainly the next step for this game was the game's release. Now, the marketing really put this game in a bad place. This game wasn't good, but it was made far worse by the fact that people already wanted to hate the game because of its identity. This entire game's marketing, and game in general, is the most anti-Saints Row game that could have been called Saints Row. I genuinely think the modern Saints Row hates the old Saints Row, and it's not necessarily that everything about the new one sucks, but there is a genuine disdain from the new game towards the older game's identity. And I think what made this worse is the fact that at the start they marketed it like Saints Row was going to be going back to its roots. They kept throwing out quotes like, this is going to be a mix between Saints Row 2 and 3, yet every trailer we saw and every bit of gameplay we saw and every bit of story gameplay we saw just screamed to us that actually this is nothing like any Saints Row we've played before. It was actually quite depressing for me, because I felt like they had the entire community in the palm of their hands. All they had to do was do right by them. But unfortunately, it just seems that as time goes by, the people who own Saints Row never want to do that. So anyway, it's launch day. I remember Deep Silver gave me an early copy of the game, and I was having a blast with it. I actually played this on last gen, which is really quite funny because Godzilla, who I was in talks with at the time, was playing on current gen. And he was having 100 times more bugs and issues than me. Actually, before COVID, I remember getting told this, they planned to release the game on Xbox One and PS4, and then do a re-release kinda like they did with Re-Elected for PS5 and Xbox Series X. Which might actually explain why the game ran better for me on last gen and felt more optimized on last gen than next gen. If the delay and just a bit of extra dev time meant they could just push it out and get onto next gen, then hey, maybe that's why it was so scuffed. But yeah, I genuinely came to the conclusion that the last gen experience was better due to this, and it was probably just luck of the draw, but it was genuinely quite frustrating for me because the bugs weren't something I really spoke about in my review because I didn't have any. I had one softlock and I had one enemy AI glitch out in a mission, meaning I couldn't complete it. That's it. And I was playing this game before the day one patch, so I was like, oh, well, those will probably be fixed in the day one patch anyway. What's the point in caring about it? In hindsight, I really should have cared about it. I think what's really funny is me and Godzilla, despite having polarizing views on the game, both knew deep down that this was going to be a train wreck in full release. Those first couple days I got to play the game early were some of the most fun days I've ever had playing Saints Row. I felt so super official at the time, but I knew the storm was looming overhead. And then finally the game released to the rest of you wonderful people, and as expected, it was hated beyond belief. The beginning of the end was here. Saints Row did so bad and disappointed so horrifically that it reached meme status. That status in the gaming industry where the entire industry just starts pointing and laughing. Every single commentary YouTuber is making videos, wow, this game sucks. And then I don't really think there's much more to say past this point that isn't kind of recent history. Then the game got 3 pretty mediocre DLCs, one being a LARP DLC. Great job, by the way, Deep Silver, using AI in your marketing.
April, everyone gets a free Dead Island 2 cosmetic pack coming in May, free for all players, new district, combat overhaul, and more for expansion pass holders, the heist and the hazards, missions, events, and more. July brings a free update, new features.
I appreciate you testing out your most shady, disgusting marketing techniques on the Saints Row community because you don't give a fuck about the IP. Compared to actually, like, you know, the other IPs that do well, like Dead Island and Kingdom Come. You wouldn't dare use it on that. No. Has to be Saints Row, because fuck Saints Row, right? I'm still mad about this 2 years later. We also got some updates, which admittedly made the game 100 times better. I do want to say this to Volition. Mini shout out here. They stuck with the game. I originally heard that there was supposed to be 2 years of life and game support for this game. We only ended up getting 1 because of the closure, of course. And also, I think they just gave up on Saints Row after they saw maybe tanking sales and poor reviews. But for that 1 year of support they did give us, they patched everything. They fixed everything they could. Unfortunately, the core foundation was fucked, frankly. But they tried, and I can commend them for that. And of course, after the game's free DLCs release and the updates released, the game was finished. We were done. We got a couple little updates past the DLCs, I believe, and then Volition got transferred to Gearbox, and then Embracer shut Volition down. And now Saints Row is left in the hands of what I can only refer to as the people who killed it. And that is the story of how I watched Saints Row burn before my eyes. How this reboot released and destroyed everything I loved about this franchise. Pretty interesting, right? I'm glad we could go back through that one last time. To any Saints Row fans who've been watching me since the very beginning when I was doing Saints Row content, and we have just gone back through this journey that you may have been there for the entirety of, a shout out to you. Because I know there are some of you watching right now that will actually remember every single step of the way and the emotions we felt back then. And to any newcomers who wasn't here for this journey, and you're watching this video going, so this is what happened to Saints Row? Count yourself lucky. Yeah, it died. Horrifically. The worst possible way it could. But hey, you know what? After everything, I had some good times with the game. I had some good times around the release of the game, and even with all the marketing disappointing fans, I had a great time making videos on it, so you know what? It wasn't all bad. Anyways, take care, people. Thanks for watching this little retrospective review on how Saints Row released.